All right, well, good afternoon. It is officially noon on a Wednesday, so I'd like to welcome you all to our conservation webinar series. Today, we're thrilled to have with us Dr. Arti Singh, Associate Professor of Agronomy here at Iowa State University, sharing with us the work on harnessing AI for pest ID and beyond, applications to support resilient crops and healthy ecosystems. So before we dive into that, I'd like to just give a quick shout out to the key partners that help make our conservation webinar series possible. They include our Iowa Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship, the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, the Iowa Nutrient Research Center, and the Leopold Center for Sustainable Agriculture. So at any time, if you have questions for Dr. Singh, feel free to enter those into the chat. And at this time, I'm going to turn the virtual floor over to her. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Liz, for the kind introduction. And thank you so much, organizers. And welcome, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here and talking about my work on AI applications in agriculture. In today's talk, I'll briefly give introduction, especially I'll talk about pest management and its importance. And then I'll talk why it is a difficult problem. And then I will talk about AI role in pest management, and I'll give you 3 examples: insect ID app, weed ID app, and then I'll talk about our pest ID chatbot. And last but not the least, I'll talk about future work in this area. So if you look at these 2 figures on the right side of the screen, the top 1 figure is of soybean field, which is strangled by this herbicide-tolerant farmer amaranth, and the bottom image is of soybean crop decimated overnight by fall armyworm. And if you see these 2 examples, these are not the rare cases. These are these routine problems which our farmers and landowners are facing every season. And when it comes to losses, if these problems, or if I say, if we leave these pests, insect, weed, diseases uncontrolled, they can cause billions of dollars of losses. So this is important when it comes in terms of the losses it can cause to agriculture. So now the question is why this problem is important. We are seeing increased overwintering by these insect pests. We are also seeing increase in geographic range. We are seeing these pests in areas where they were not appearing. And then we are also seeing that there is cost involved in scouting these problems. We have these misidentification of pest. And also because of the pesticide overuse, we are seeing the impact on our environment. And this is all while we are in need to grow more food for this growing population with less amount of resources. So one of the biggest impact which we know, which will lead to by managing this pest is targeted mitigation rather than blanket spraying. We can reduce chemical usage, which will increase our profitability of our farmers, and which will also limit impact on beneficial species in our environment. And this will also resolve key pain points our farmers and landowners are facing today. So why this pest management is a difficult problem? When we see we are outside in our field, we see a lot of insects, and we don't know the insect which we are seeing is a pest or predator. If we talk about corn and soybean system, our farmers and landowners know what they yearly see. But when we grow our row crops or new cover crops or new crops, like I am working on some new crops, legume crops here at Iowa State, we don't know that for this new crop, this insect is a pest or it's a beneficial species, because these insects can look alike. So first row you see, this is a bean leaf beetle. And in all these 5 pictures, it looks very different because it is in different colors. We can see these insects which are very similar, but these are different species. One is southern corn rootworm, other is bean leaf beetle. Same with western corn rootworm or striped cucumber beetle. Another problem is these insects can have different life stages. Maybe we know how the adult look, but we are very confused with the caterpillar or the nymph stage. Same with the weed species. We can see we have these different amaranth weed species. These are different genuses, but they look very similar. When it comes to poisonous versus non-poisonous, like water hemlock versus wild carrot, they look alike. So how can we differentiate these insects, pests, and how early we can diagnose because we all know in integrated pest management, the correct and effective management starts with the right diagnosis. Not just that, we know when it comes to these pest and insect, the different terminology is being used. Some people use common names, some people use scientific names, some people use local names. There are different classifications. For example, in case of lady beetle, when I started working on these projects, I thought that all lady beetles are our friends. But I didn't know that there is a lady beetle called Mexican bean beetle, which can be pest on the Solanaceae family plants. Another thing is there is a lot of variability when it comes to classification. From landowners' perspective, we want to, or from conservation perspective, we want to know whether the weed is invasive or native. But maybe our farmers are interested whether this is an annual weed or it's a perennial. So these are various classification also, which makes the scalability of this problem very difficult. So for more than a decade, I have been working with engineers, plant scientists, data scientists, extension scientists in collaboration with farmers to bring AI applications in agriculture. And one of the questions which we have been chasing for a long time is how can we automate and how can we use AI to automate monitoring of stresses, scouting of stresses, and management. So this big question is where our efforts have been, all efforts have been, and our new grants are directed that how can we bring these vision, how can we bring vision and intelligence to these smart tools, to our phone? How can we use these rovers and drones so we can automatically scout our fields for the pest, for the weeds and diseases? So in 2014, we came up with this ICQP paradigm that how AI can be used for identification of pest. It can be used for classification, quantification, and prediction. So this is where our all research problems lie, that how can AI be used to automate these four quadrants which you are seeing here. So when we talk about AI, it's a big umbrella term. And within this AI, machine learning is a subset of artificial intelligence. And when we say deep learning, again, it is a subset of machine learning. Currently, we are in this third wave, which is a generative AI. When I started working on AI in 2014, we were in this pre-GPT era. So we have these two eras, which you see in this figure. This is a pre-GPT era, and this is post-GPT era. And I would say in the history of AI, GPT is a game changer. You will ask a question, why is that? Before pre-GPT era, people knew AI is there, but people were not believing in AI. People were not aware of the use cases of AI. People were not interacting with the AI. But after GPT era, these generative models, these transformer model, foundation model came up, which led to people to interact with, have conversation with AI. So this is where I feel that post-GPT era is important. And currently we are in third wave, which is called generative AI. And generative AI basically means that we can generate anything if we have data. Using data, like GPT does, using data, you can generate an image, you can generate a new video, you can generate text, you can conversation. So this is where we are currently in terms of AI. When we talk about artificial intelligence, there are four main things we keep in mind. So artificial intelligence, as we all know, it is not natural intelligence, it is human-like intelligence. Chatbots is one example where we can converse back and forth. One of the prime requirements for these artificial intelligence to work is big data. We need a very big data. When I started working in 2014, we used to think 1,000 images is a big data. But as we move in 2025, now we are talking about millions, several hundred million images is big data. And currently we have that capacity, those computers which can process that big data. Another important thing in artificial intelligence is it works like human brain because it is able to recognize pattern. And one of the example I like to give here that these machines, if we train with large data set, they can differentiate, they can learn pattern from the data. And here you can see how they can also differentiate these fine-grained problems where these look-alike species like this viceroy butterfly versus monarch, they can differentiate. And another role of artificial intelligence is in decision making, in automating these various tasks. So if we have artificial intelligence can very well follow these rules. So if you have clear rules, it can very well be used to automate various tasks. So in 2014, when I started working, as I said, we started working with very less amount of images, and we didn't know what is that number which will give us these AI model or app which will work in field. So starting with 1,000 images, every year we started increasing the number of images to create these models which can differentiate various diseases, identify diseases, classify disease, or quantify. But that question, what is that number which will work? So in 2021, I came across this iNaturalist data. And as all you know, that iNaturalist is a citizen science data. It has millions and millions of images of various species from insects, animal kingdom, plant kingdom. So this is where we started with. We started with 2 million images and started training a model. And we started seeing good results in the sense that the model started working in field. When you take a picture of insect, it will say that, hey, this is this insect, but there's still, we were not happy with the results because earlier model had accuracy, which was around 60, 70%, which was not good enough. Over the year, we increased the number of images, and finally, we found that when we are training these models to identify insect is like 16 million. So the final model which we trained, a recent model, which is working under our Insect ID app, has been trained on 16 million images of insects, and it can identify around 4,000 insect species with accuracy around 97%, and which is huge. So if you open our PestID app, then you will have two tabs. And if you want to identify insect, you just take a picture of an insect in a real time, or you can use already taken picture of insect, which is on your phone, and it will give you a real prediction in real time. One of the problem with these lot of apps on market is that they can give you a answer with very high confidence. They can give a wrong answer with high confidence. So how we can gain trust in these apps? So this was one of the questions when I started testing these models in field. And I talked to my engineers with whom I was working that as soon as our stakeholders will use our app, and if this gives a wrong answer, they are not going to touch this app again, because in market, there are very good apps. So to counter that problem, we came up with this out of distribution system where if the model has not seen an image on which it has been trained, it will give you a warning. So in this case, this Dectes soybean stem borer at that time was not in our database. My image or an image of any object, if you take a picture, it will say that there's a warning message. I'm not certain. So this is where we introduce the trustworthiness in this model, that as soon as the image of an insect, which it has not been trained, or any object, if it takes, it will say, I'm not sure. So this is where we are including the trustworthiness in our models. Another coolest thing which we did in our model is that when we have similar looking species, in this case, you see cabbage looper can look very well, very similar to gray looper moth. So our model, when it gets a picture which is in which the features are not clear, it will not say that it is a gray looper moth or cabbage looper. It will say that it is confused between these two species, and it will say the top prediction will be with the higher accuracy, and the second prediction will be lower accuracy. Same with the example of wild parsnip and fennel. It is confused with this image, but it is saying I'm maybe 80% sure that this is wild parsnip, and I'm 20% sure that this is fennel. So this is where, with conformal prediction and uncertainty quantification, we are trying to improve trustworthiness in these models. So now comes the results. So when we started training these models, one of the goal was that how well these models can identify not just adult, but also different stages. So one of the best thing which I came across was when I was training these models early on. I was teaching a course in my I was teaching one lesson in my class, and a student asked a question about monarch chrysalis pupa, and I said that term stuck in my mind, and I just tested our app that whether our app can identify chrysalis, monarch chrysalis, and to my surprise, I found our app can identify. because we were not aware in case of iNaturalist, what are the different stages our data has. And then we started testing different stages of species which we had early on. And we found that our app can not just only identify the adult stage, but it can identify egg, larva, pupa, nymph of insects where we have a lot of images or a lot of data. And that opened a new area for us, because this is where the real application of AI is. Because when you go with these different moth species, you will see that they look very alike. So this is where AI can help us not just identify the adult, but also it can identify different stages of insect species. Not only that, the USD website has around 60 different insect species which are listed as invasive species. And we tested our app and we found that it can identify majority of those insect species at very high accuracy. And then the question is between intraspecies variability, interspecies variability, our app does a phenomenal job in identifying those species, look-alike species with very high accuracy. So then the question was that it works very well on insects. Will it work on weed? So this is where we started working on weed parallelly. That let's see how this models can work. And the coolest part of these models was that we are using these iNaturalist images using self-supervised learning. We are training these models using self-supervised learning, where these models are not using the labels or in the initial phase, and they are using labels in the last phase of training. So the pre-trained model is not seeing any labels. So what we did in case of weed images, we trained this model using 15 million weed images. And we found that our model can identify these 1,600 weed species with very high accuracy of around 96%. And this gave me confidence. And when I started testing it, I was amazed to see what AI can do when it comes to identifying these weeds at early stage. So as you can see in a picture, this is a picture of Solanaceae family weed, which is Carolina horse nettle. And when we use this in field, in real time, it was able to not just identify, we were able to include the taxonomic classification. So in earlier slide, I said that there are different kinds of classification. And it's good to know not just taxonomic classification, but right out there that is it an invasive species? What are the different look-alike species? Is it undesirable for the livestock? So all these features you can get in a fraction of seconds. So this is where I would say the application of AI is very relevant when it comes to the knowledge. Then we started testing that how early weeds it can identify. So we tested this on a lot of weeds. We started with the Midwest weeds, and we found that not just when the weeds are like 3 or 4 inches, in some cases it can identify weeds when they are even smaller than 3 to 4 inches. And we found that look-alike species, same genus, different species, like Amaranthaceae family, poisonous versus non-poisonous, these foxtail species, which are very look-alike, it can identify them with very high accuracy. So this is where, again, I would say this is where the confidence comes, when we can identify, and applicability comes when it can identify at early stage, because for weed management, we are looking to do these herbicide treatment at early stage when the weeds are 3 to 4 inches. Another thing was, we knew that our insect app can identify these invasive species. So we tested USDA listed invasive species, and we found again, our models is doing phenomenal job in identifying these invasive species. And recently we submitted this paper for review, and the reviewer was asking, can it identify at early stage? And currently our research is showing that it is able to identify these invasive species at a very early stage. So now the question is so we have these two apps which are working phenomenal, which have been trained on millions of images. But now the question is that these are very static apps. We cannot interact because we can know the taxonomic classification, we can know a lot of different criteria about insect or weed, But then if a landowner or the farmer is in field and they have some question, they cannot interact back and forth in real time. So this is where we decided that we will link these apps with a chat bot. And for that, we started training a large language model. So till now, what you saw was these apps are trained on images, millions of images. But when we have to train a model to interact, we have to train it on documents. So what we did was we started with our Iowa State University manual for these insect and weed, and we took all these PDFs, converted these booklets into PDFs, and then we used those extension documents to train to answer the query which we have regarding these insects and weed. So what we did was for these 4,000 insects, we generated the context in the form of what are the IPM strategies, what is the scientific name, what is the size of insect, all these context. And then we use that context along with these documents to train a large language model. And using retrieval augmented generation, we were able to create a chatbot and link it with these detection apps. So now, when you click our PestID app, you can take a picture, and then you will have this question box here where you can have questions. So if you have a question about spotted lanternfly, and the best part which I liked is when I asked the question, what should I do when I see a spotted lanternfly in Iowa? So it answered me, if you see spotted lanternfly in Iowa, report the sighting to the Iowa Department of Idols. And then it said, as it is an invasive species not native to the region. And this is where I see that these apps not just are letting us know about these species, but they are also directing where a person should go if they notice some invasive species in their neighborhood or in their farm or field. We did the same thing with the weed app. We connected it with the chat bot, and here in a real time, you can answer. And I am working with our weed scientist here, Wesley Everman and Megan, and they have tested these apps and chatbots, and they are very much confident in the responses. So this is where working with the subject matter expert is giving us confidence in rolling out these apps in future. So now the question is that this is very good that we have now created these apps which are like a global app which have been trained on millions and millions of images, and it can identify these insects and weeds which are present globally, because 4,000 insects are not just these many insects are not present in Midwest. If you see our Iowa State manual, it lists around 50 to 60 insects which are relevant to Midwest. And if we look at our ID manual, it lists around 84 weed species. So talking to Megan, when I was working with engineers in training these apps, I said, could you test our app, which has been trained on the 1,600 weed species? Megan said right away that she is not ready to vet these 1,600 species because she works on these 84 weed species. So then I said, okay, you play with our global app, and in the meantime, we will develop a local app for Iowa. So this is where we came up with global to local strategy. And this works because these apps have been trained on 4 or 5 GPUs, which have been running for months and months, and it is using a lot of energy. So if any other state people or any other country is interested in creating these apps, they'll be using a lot of energy, and which is a waste of energy. So with global to local strategy, anybody in other states can use our global weed ID app, and they can fine tune it for their local need. So person in Florida will have different weeds, but they can very well use our global app, and they can fine tune it for their local weed species in Florida. And or a person who's in Japan and interested in identifying weeds in Japan, they don't have to now go through the training process. They can just use our global weed ID map and fine tune on their Japanese wheat, which are prevalent in their region. So this is very relevant because now the local app not just have less number of species, but the complete list of species which are relevant to particular state or particular region. And these models are now lightweight also, and they can also be now boarded onto these sprayer drones and ground rovers, because you are not dealing with now millions of images trained model, which is a very bulky, heavy model, which cannot go on these devices. Another coolest part of these local models is, so when I was working in one of the crop I worked, in field, we found this mint looking weed. And I had a global app, and when I used our global app, it gave us with a low accuracy or low confidence that it could be Asian copperleaf. And I got very nervous because working with Megan, I knew Asian copperleaf is a new weed, and because this is where I was talking, what are the new weeds our app can help. And I saw Asian copperleaf. Then I got very nervous, and I called Megan and Wes that could you come to my field, and they came to my field, and they were also nervous, but they told that this is not Asian copperleaf, but this is a common copperleaf, which is a rhomboid copperleaf, which is a native copperleaf. Then this gave us a chance that now we can put these Asian copperleaf and rhomboid copperleaf into our local model rather than training our big global model. So this is where the relevance is. And in our recent USDA project, we are trying to map these into our county map in a real time. So this is we propose, and we will be working with Megan and Wesley, that how can we update these maps in real time, so that our farmers and landowners know that, hey, now this Asian copperleaf or rhomboid copperleaf, this is already in Boone and or the neighboring counties, so they should be aware and they should be looking for, because once these invasive species, as they enter, it takes very less amount of time to for them to invade large regions or counties. So this is where the real use of these local apps will come. Another coolest thing is, when I was looking into the invasive species in Iowa, I came across this burning bush, and I thought that I have seen this in backyard. So when I was in high school, I used to say this, no study, no confusion. And so this very well relates to this, because I had no idea earlier when I was not working on this weed app that I have a invasive invasive plant species in my backyard. But when I started working, I came to know that this burning bush is invasive bush. So this app can also help if we can. The local app can also start adding native species or look-alike species. So it can also help people who are in conservation or landowners that to choose a native species rather than invasive, because for conserving our land, we need to grow these native rather than beautiful looking invasive species. Another thing comes to my mind when working with these apps, like insect weed, that now these can also work as making every citizen as a land steward. How? As I said, more knowledge you have, then you start seeing things. If you have this power in your hand, like with a phone, that you can identify species and it is telling you in real time that it is invasive, then you can also report as soon as you see in your area. And it is predicted that this spotted lanternfly, which is an invasive insect, is going to reach from East Coast to West Coast by 2033. So that means it will, if it is going from East Coast to West Coast, and we already know, seeing the map of Tree of Heaven, that it is spread from East to West Coast. So it is very likely that this might happen sooner. And if we see the map of Iowa, we see we already have Tree of Heaven in Iowa. So this is where I see that from conservation perspective, we have to see we have to take into consideration both the host species and pest when it comes to their spread. And this is what we are also working in our new project, AI Engage, and DARPA project on biosecurity, that how can we detect these invasive species before they enter the country. So this is where I feel AI can be very useful also, that detect before they enter the country, or detect when they are within the country in different state, and how they will, in a course of time, they will reach from one place to other. So we started this vision of integrating, I would say, artificial intelligence into these rovers, robot in 2015. And last year, we started putting these vision into reality by using our local weed app, how we can use that weed app to map these weeds and field, and then using our sprayer drone to spray these site-specific areas and do site-specific weed management. So this is where currently we are going in future, because current technology, drones are used to identify one or two weed at a time. But the future vision is that, can we have artificial intelligence as such in a end-to-end pipeline, so that as we are flying our drone and mapping weeds, we are not just identifying palmer amaranth, but we are also identifying other weeds which are present. And then we can also quantify the threshold of these different weeds and do these site-specific spray based on where it is needed, rather than doing these blanket sprays. So next step is, so we have created these global insect and weed models. Now we are very much interested in creating our disease model. The disease problem or disease model we started, was the first work I started in 2014. But as I said, I started working on diseases and bringing AI applications. But one of the problems with the diseases is the data size. And so we don't have enough relevant data on diseases, because if you see any disease, it can be caused by bacteria, viruses, or fungi. And it is very difficult to differentiate these diseases without an expert, because the symptoms are very similar if the disease is caused by bacteria or fungi. So you need plant diagnostic clinics to verify that, oh, this disease is caused by fungi or bacteria. So this is where right now, I received this year 2 federal grants. One is AI Engage, and another is USDA DSFAS, where the idea is how we can use different states to gather disease data and create and use AI in differentiating these diseases, and how we can use these advanced tools to map it on a large scale. Another area I have been working is how we can use the information which we have learned now from around 16,000 insect and weed species, how that information can be used to teach these 4-H kids, FFA students, K through 12 students, and increase their knowledge base. So we know we talk about these charismatic species in schools, about monarch, we talk about lady beetle, but we are not talking about other exciting things. And as I said, we need to make every citizen a land steward, and this will start when we include this knowledge through games. So this is another area where I'm working heavily, creating games out of this research. So here you see a lot of games on insects, impossible imposters, life cycle scrambler, matching mayhem, critter catching, where there are stories for kindergartners, a tale of 2 butterflies, memory madness, where we are making kids to memorize about these different insect scientific names. Some games we have created for weeds, like toxic twins, identifying these similar looking weeds, and also puzzles. So we are working on this area. And so I also lead workforce in Ag and AI, which is called VIA. So we do a lot of broadening participation activities. We do a lot of workshops, demos. So the whole goal is, how we can also inspire next generation of scientists, future innovators to work in this area of ag and AI. And the future outlook is that we have worked on insect and weed ID. We have coupled it with chatbot. So we are working to make our chatbot more robust by training it on more extension documents and make it more context, more region specific. We are in process of developing our disease ID app and games, gamifying some of this work. And we are expanding it to new crops, regions, pest types. And also we are making it more, as I said, these chatbots, more context aware decision support tools. In global relevance, as I said, we recently received NSF award where it's called AI Engage. So we are working with Australia, Japan, India. So we are partnering to increase the database for disease because this is a very relevant problem which our farmers are requesting us to create this app, and also making how we can scale these to different ecosystems so that they play a role in global food security and sustainability. With this, I would like to thank our funding agencies and a team of our scientists from engineers, Bhaskar, Ganapati Subramaniam, Shekhar Shramik, who is engineer, and we have Darren Mueller, Matt O'Neill, Greg Tilka, who are our plant scientist and extension scientist, and Danny Singh, who's again plant scientist, and whole our team of students and our technicians. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Excuse me. So feel free to put in your questions in the chat as we go through these kind of closing slides. If you attended today's webinar to earn a CCA CEU, please send the information here on the screen to Elena Whitaker at alenaw@iastate.edu by 5 p.m. today, and we'll get that submitted on your behalf later this week. So again, if you're getting a CCA, please get that information sent to Elena Whitaker, alenaw@iastate.edu by 5 p.m. today. You want to go ahead to the next one? This is our second one of the year, so if you are tuning in for the first time in 2026, we're asking everyone to voluntarily fill out this survey, demographic survey as a USDA-funded program. You'd only need to do it once for the entire year, so if you do it today, then you're good to go for the rest of the year. You can find that by either scanning that quick QR code or visiting that URL, iowalearningfarms.org/survey. It should only take you a couple minutes to complete that, and we appreciate everyone who does. Thank you. All right, and I think that brings us up to next week. We will have Dr. Marshall McDaniel, another professor in agronomy, associate professor of soil and plant interactions in this case, talking about how much do cover crops and prairie reduce losses, specifically nitrate and N2O and nitrate leaching, excuse me. So I hope you all can join us next week. And it does look like we've had some questions come in. So one of the questions is specifically looking at annual grasses. So how accurate would you say that your models have been on identifying some of the annual grasses that can look very, very similar?
So yeah, that's a very good question. And I would say, as I was showing the example of foxtail, because even the expert, I have not put that one slide where in our research, we showed that where the flag leaf is attached, the experts have to see the auricles and all minor features, the hair. So what we did was we used those regions, the neck regions of these grass species, and we were surprised to see that our Weed ID app is able to identify these grass species with a high accuracy. I won't say that it is identifying as same as the dicot species, but yeah, it is identifying with very high accuracy.
And speaking of like, when you said that the app was able to give you a confidence low or high, could you consider maybe adding a feature where the model would ask for additional data or maybe a different picture so that it could potentially improve that confidence?
Yeah, so this is again a very good question. I would say this is where the next, these new grants, which I said, NSF and USDA. So how we can make our local model more robust, and how can we incorporate these expert knowledge? This is where we are going to, and our upcoming version of the app will have that feedback loop where we have users telling that, hey, could you have these images, or they are testing, as they're testing also, we can use those images in retraining these models. So this is where I think the next iteration will have, and that's a very good question.
And I don't believe you touched on this, but so maybe it's another grant opportunity, but the question is ability to identify aquatic nuisance species. Have you dove into the water yet?
So are you talking about insect? So yeah, that's a very good question. I would say this data set doesn't, as you said, new grant opportunity, this data set doesn't have aquatic weed species. But I would say some of the invasive aquatic weed species, which were in USDA website and which were in iNaturalist, we have it in our model. We don't have all, but I think this is where the next iterations will come, where we will have requests, because in southern states we have a lot of a problem of these aquatic weeds. And I would say anybody who's interested can use our global model, and fine tuning will be very easy, and we won't need now millions of images. Now with several hundred images, you can train your local model for any kind of like small niche weed species.
This is a interesting one here. So photographing insects feels like it can be really challenging, and I can speak from experience that capturing that moving bug is sometimes difficult. Is there
Yes.
an optimal distance or like maximum distance from a specimen for the model to be able to accurately identify the species?
Yeah, again, I would say this is very good question, because I am working with our international partners and they keep telling me, Dr. Singh, it's very difficult to catch insects because they fly. And I myself have collected data when I was training our insect app early on, because we had problem of these insects in our crop. And I would stand from like 2 feet distance and zoom from distance, especially for the hoppers, which are very teeny tiny. And I will zoom 5x. And you won't believe, we use those zoom 5x images and even with low resolution images of this potato leaf hopper. And I was amazed that our model is able to identify. This is where I'm saying, if expert is collecting these images, and even if we are putting in this folder with all high resolution, low resolution images, you can identify. So I would say 2 feet distance, you can very well zoom out and take an image, and our app is able to identify those images, because we have used that kind of data set, especially our local model. We have not done that in global model.
So within the plant ID, do you collect metadata such as the date, location, things like that?
Uh, so I will say we have not yet done because we started with the research. The research questions earlier were that what that data size and what model is needed. But new iteration which we are working, I think the demand, especially when we are mapping, we are hoping to collect that kind of data where we can also collect GPS location. We will use time, day, so we can see where the problem is. So that will be our new set of data collection, which we will be doing in our new projects.
And a couple last questions here. What feedback have you received from kind of the lay farmers and landowners that are using the app?
So we have rolled out this app in Farm Progress Show, and I would say I was amazed with the feedback because some of the weed people say, oh, they don't need app because they know their weeds. And I have these farmers coming on our booth with these saying this weed, I don't know what it is, but they have an image. And I am not a weed scientist. I'm a plant scientist who work at interface of various disciplines. So they will say, oh, they don't know this weed, but this weed is killing all the weeds around. And when we use our app, it tells which weed it is. And this weed was like a plantain weed, I still remember. So I think we have received a very good feedback. And every year at Farm Progress Show, we receive that feedback, and we tried incorporating those feedback. And I think that this is where these new versions are getting better and better, I would say.
And kind of as you're building that feedback loop, um, do you anticipate that there'll be a way to give feedback if the results that do come back are identified incorrectly?
Yes, so I think this is where I think we are most interested because we know majority of the insect or weeds where the accuracy is very high. It is not going to give wrong, but there are still classes where we know there are gaps in iNaturalist data and in our own data collection. There are some species where the data set is not enough or not diverse. So I think again I would say we are interested to know where you are getting wrong answers. That feedback is very important because then either that we have less images, less diversity, or there is some other things going. And I see that problem very often myself because our app is not right now professional app. It's like research app, and so we are trying to cater to those needs that, especially for the rare species, it gives wrong predictions and where we need more data collection. And so we are very open to that kind of feedback where it is not working because that is where it helps our research and be more innovative.
So our final question here, kind of combining these two, is it publicly available and free for everyone to use?
Yes, so our app is a web-based app, and it is free for anyone to use. There is no place, but if you type PestID or I have a QR code of my app, it will take you there. I had it somewhere. Let's see what it is.
So it's not an app in the sense that most people would go to the app store, but you're going to open a
Yeah,
browser
it's a
and
web-based.
navigate. Yep.
It's a web-based app because we are still in process of releasing more iterations. The current version of the app right now we are training is on 140 million images. So these ones with 12 million and 16 million. But we are retraining with a newer model because the new model came up and it is more robust model. So current model we are retraining. So we are not yet satisfied, but according to Wes, Darren, it is in a pretty good shape, I would say.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Singh. This has been enlightening, and I look forward to trying this app out myself. So thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to new updates as you get your disease and everything included in your next iteration. So thank you again, and thank you for everyone for joining us today. Have a great afternoon.
Bye-bye.